If you allow this narrative to grow that the prime minister isn't here for you, he's not listening to you, he's doing other things, that's going to be hard to shake.
Prime Minister, can you comment on the claims about a recession?
I think
and the economy, sir?
Pregnant or technically pregnant? Recession or technical recession? If you ask Mark Carney, you will probably not get an answer, because while Canadians are being told not to worry, the Prime Minister has been hiding from the media. But make no mistake, Mark Carney and his Liberals are in deep trouble, because the more they refuse to explain why their plan is not working, the more they prove Pierre Poilievre and the opposition right. You can't spend years repeating the same mistakes, give the country a new salesman, call him a financial genius, and then act shocked when Canadians notice the results are still the same. And this may be the long beginning of the end for Mark Carney's carefully manufactured image as the man who was supposed to fix everything.
Let's take a look.
I do want to start off on your government's response to this most recent data around GDP and the calls from the opposition Conservatives to focus on it. I listened very carefully, and I read the statement from the finance minister in which it was characterized as political theater. Why aren't you more worried about a recession?
Oh, we're very worried about our economy. We're worried about, the trade winds and the challenges our economy faces. I think Canadians made a choice, obviously over a year ago now, to elect a prime minister with business and economic credentials, a prime minister that's a statesman, prime minister that's going to travel the world. I mean, he just got back from India, Australia, Japan, China, signing trade deals worth billions of dollars for our economy, going to be, bring thousands of jobs to our economy. So to answer that question, Vashi, of course we're worried. Like, we know that we trade a lot of our product, obviously, with the United States. We know there's challenges there. So, you know what? If you're running a business, if you're running a government, you deal with the hand you're dealt. You step back, you say, what can we do? What can we do to strengthen our economy? What can we do to build our economy? And I'd argue that, despite the leader of the opposition who seems to be celebrating, seems to be, cheering on, in his mind, bad news, I'd argue that there's a lot of very, very positive indicators to our economy, and I like where we're heading in the future.
Okay. You normally see Liberals talk themselves into a corner, but I don't think I've actually seen it happen twice within the same answer. So the first thing that he said is, well, you deal with the hand that you're dealt. Time out.
Did you not deal that hand yourself?
Let's take his analogy. So you're the dealer, and you know what all the cards are, and you know the cards that you've been dealing out for the last 10 years. So you know the hands that everybody has been dealt because you were the ones that dealt with them. You were the ones that decided what cards were going to be in that deck, and you were the one that decided what order those cards were going to be given. So you dealt yourselves that hand. So, well, we have to deal with the hand that we dealt ourselves. That's a problem for us.
But it's shocking to me that the Liberals, especially the ones who have been around for a very long time, are acting like they had absolutely zero hand in this. I don't know if they are trying to convince themselves that it's not their fault, or if they're trying to convince Canadians that it's not their fault.
Why not both? But the second part of it was actually kind of crazy, because he then tries to say, well, Pierre Poilievre, seems to be cheering on and getting excited. So first of all, he hasn't been. Second of all, you actually saw him, I would say, visibly twitch in a good way when a reporter asked him on Friday, but, well, isn't this a technical recession? Aren't you overreacting? And then he just essentially said, we're talking about families here. We're talking about people that are dealing with the consequences of the policies of the last 10 years. So that was a very real moment from Pierre. So I didn't see any celebrating or getting excited over it. I saw someone who was very annoyed with the framing of the question, and that the people that matter most in this whole calculation, which is the average Canadian, are getting lost. And then Long goes on to say, well, he almost led himself into getting excited about the bad financial news, and then he had to stop himself because he was like, oh crap, that train isn't going to land very well, so I need to try to back that up. And, well, you know, he's imagined it. So this is the craziness that is going on from Wayne Long in this answer.
Well, and the thing that I found amusing, perhaps, is when Wayne Long had indicated the Prime Minister is traveling all over the world. You know, he just came back from India and Australia and China.
Everyone get impressed.
Right, and he's making all these trade deals. Let me give you an example. So the young man next door asked if, for the summer, he can cut our grass for $20 every time he cuts the grass. And we said, sure, no problem. But we don't know if that summer is going to be very hot and dry and the grass is just going to die and he's not going to have any grass to cut. In that case, he's not making any money. This is like Carney's trade deal. You can have a deal in place, but unless it actually happens, there's no money coming in for the country.
That's actually an excellent analogy. And the last part here is, I don't think you want to be bragging about the fact that the Prime Minister is traveling all over the world, given the fact that it's coming out that he's spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on catering and luxury butter, while Canadians are dealing with a recession, losing their jobs, losing their homes, and losing their meals. That's not going to land too well, Wayne Long.
Do you really argue that there are positive indicators? And if so, what are they? Because if you take a deep dive into this data, I understand the counter to the idea that it's a recession. There's lots of consternation about what that first quarter data will actually look like moving forward, what the second quarter might look like. But if you take a deep look, take, for example, business investment, 5 consecutive quarters on the decline, a number of exports on the decline in successive quarters as well. Unemployment, more than 112,000 jobs lost just since the beginning of this year. And all of that, while your government and the Prime Minister says affordability has never been better. We're going to be the fastest growing economy in the G7. That has not materialized. The statistics I cited at the start of this question have.
Well, Vashi, I mean, look, I take the points. I think Canadians know, certainly as a government and leaders in the government, we know that we face headwinds. We know we're in a trade war. And what can we do about that? We can diversify our economy. We can build our economy. I would argue some of the indicators are very strong. IMF projects our economy to be second fastest growing economy in the G7. Wages are outpacing inflation. Best net debt to GDP in the G7. Strongest fiscal position in the G7. Best credit rating in the world. And look at this one. Highest foreign investment per capita in the G7. There's a lot of strong indicators to our economy. So if the leader of the opposition wants to box up, you know, a couple facts and a couple articles that he's read and a couple indicators that are backwards looking, they're in the past. We're focused on now. We're focused on what we can do. We can invest in our country. It's no surprise that our economy is facing challenges. As a good friend of mine says, we need to buckle up. We need to take those headwinds head on and control what we can control. And any good business owner, any good, government is going to look and say, what can we do? We can sit back and we can just kind of fold our hands and let it come to us, or we can be proactive. Any good business person is going to be proactive. That's what our Prime Minister is doing. He's saying, look, our largest trading partner, no secret to anybody watching here tonight, is the United States of America. We have challenges with that trade relationship right now. Did we expect that 5 years ago? Of course not. We saw it coming about a year ago. So what do we do about that? We pivot. We build our economy. We diversify. We become not reliant, as the Prime Minister says, but we build resilience by traveling the world, by trading with countries that believe in the same things we believe. We've got so much that the world wants that we can do this. We can lean on each other. We can build from within. We will create thousands of jobs, whether it's investments in infrastructure,
with great respect, Prime Minister, when will that materialize? You have been, the Prime Minister and your government has been employing comparisons with the G7, to highlight the facts that you want to highlight. But there are other very salient ones that aren't just backwards looking. I mean, 112,000 people who lost their job, that's not looking backwards. That affects their future. 1 in 4 people who, according to the Food Bank organization, is experiencing food insecurity as we speak. That's not looking backwards. When you keep saying, just trust us, we've got this. It's a hard time, but we've got this. Doesn't that fall on deaf ears to those people who are suffering right now and neglect to address the significance of what they are experiencing?
Well said.
Wayne Long got very awkward very quick after that confidently delivered answer.
Well, because his answer was probably rehearsed. And Vashi's absolutely right. We've lost 112,000 jobs in the first 4 months of this year, as unfortunately we predicted would happen, because back in October, November, December, the Liberals were bragging about all these jobs that were being created, which unfortunately many of them were seasonal retail jobs. And now we look, there's over 100,000 jobs lost between January and April.
Well, and it's actually quite pathetic, some of the talking points that they're standing up in the House of Commons and saying, because Patty Heidi was trying to brag that, well, we're going to be bringing in 3,000 jobs over the summer.
That's not a lot of jobs in a country the size of Canada, especially one that just lost 112,000.
And they're temporary jobs. And all of those stats, or quote unquote facts that Mr. Long had presented, they're all loaded. Oh, great. So the IMF says you're going to be the second fastest growing economy in the G7. Well, they're basically saying what Mark Carney wants them to say. So that's not really based on anything. They're just saying that. Number two, the net debt to GDP position. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that's them trying to say, well, all of our debt plus the CPP, that's what that means. So we're going to keep saying that every time they call it out, because it's a bunch of bull. The CPP is not part of the government portfolio. They shouldn't be using that to actually backstop that in terms of that talking point. And everybody else in the world understands that.
Right. They don't use that metric. Like, they don't use, if they have a state-sponsored pension plan, they do not include that as their asset when they're calculating this net debt to GDP ratio.
Right. Because if you use the debt to GDP, we are really, really far behind. And that's what they don't want to talk about. Anyhow, it doesn't get better for Mr. Long. It gets worse.
Look, we know there's challenges. We know there's Canadians that are struggling. We absolutely understand that. But when your auto sector, your steel and aluminum sector, your softwood lumber sector are targeted by our largest trading partner, unfair, unjust, illegal tariffs put on those industries, you're going to have repercussions. You are going to have impact. We are supporting those industries. We're standing with those workers. But we can't just sit back and feel sorry for ourselves. We need to build. We need to grow. We need to help those industries pivot, and we are going to grow from within. We will have an economy that will be the best in the G7. We will have an economy that's going to be resilient, and we will have an economy that will be the envy of every other country in the G7.
Do you
it
concede?
will take some time.
But, Minister, do you concede at this moment in time the opposite is what Canadians are seeing? When you say we're going to build, 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 there are not a plethora of the projects that were promised more than a year ago now that are under construction. Most of them are still making their way through the process. The evidence is in those GDP numbers. If you're, if it's 0.1%, 0.2% contraction or 0.1% growth, either way, the economy has completely flatlined. When you talk about, for example, the tools that your government is putting into place, I'll take one in the budget that was all about capital cost allowance that was supposed to accelerate, be used as a tool for the private sector to accelerate their business development, business investment, pardon me. Instead, the opposite has happened. Like I pointed out a few moments ago, right? Business investment is declining now for 5 straight quarters. If you were if the business community believed everything that you were saying about how great the economy was going to be, wouldn't the opposite be true?
I'd argue back, Vashi, that the business community, the economic leaders, the business leaders of this country are excited about the future of this country. I think they're excited to see a government that believes in growth. They're excited to see a government that wants to work with them to grow. I know our natural resource sector, our oil and gas, our nuclear sector, our defense sector, our infrastructure sectors, our housing sectors are thrilled with the investments we're making.
Then why aren't they investing? Why aren't they investing?
I mean, I can't speak specifically why, one business or one company's not investing. I would argue there's major investments from coast to coast to coast that are happening in this country.
I want to applaud Vashi on this interview because she was not accepting any bull. And that's exactly what's been coming out. And I think it's because that's all you've been hearing. you've been hearing, this term technical recession. That actually really isn't an accepted term. And it's amazing that this is the term that they're trying to say. And Vassie makes a good point. Okay, fine. Let's say the first quarter wasn't an actual recession, but even if it was 0.1% growth, that means the economy has flatlined.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. That means there is no growth. You can't just try and twist it and say, well, it's not that bad. It actually did grow. Well, it didn't, because your own government agency put out the stats that shows that it did not. And this is the issue. And the government, or rather the opposition, is not gleeful about this. What they're doing is they're jumping on it because Mark Carney yet broke another promise.
Right, and this needs fixing. Canadians are losing their jobs. Canadians cannot afford to feed their children. Canadians are losing their homes. Insolvency is up. I don't even know what percent anymore. They're saying that, 1 in 3 people are defaulting on their mortgage at some point during the year.
1 in 3 people are missing payments. Yeah.
Missing payments, thank you. This is unheard of. We had done a video a few months ago that the Liberals removed, well, not entirely removed, but they changed how banks charge NSF fees. It went from as high as $45 or $50 down to $10. And we're saying, yes, that's a good thing, but so many people are getting to the end of their pay and there's still a few days left before the next one. And that's why Canadians are seeing these NSF fees. So the government had to do something.
Well, and it's a very telling indicator because banks are posting even higher record profits. How could they be doing that? Well, there's a lot of these NSF fees that are being charged that contributes to that profit margin. And that's the really, really disturbing part about this. But it's interesting because later on, the power play panel was brought on. And Lisa Ray, Tom Mulcair, and Mr. Benzies from the Toronto Star, they all weighed in on how the government was responding to this. And let me tell you, it's not good.
Does this data mean something politically?
Yes, in a roundabout way. What it means something politically is it allows the opposition to basically hammer on the government on two things. Number one, what's your plan to make sure that Canadians are feeling better? And I agree very much with Brian. Rob Oliphant definitely nailed the response that was needed. Don't dismiss the fact that they may be a technical recession. Talk about what your people are feeling, right? That's the most important part, is to show empathy. And that's where it could get dangerous for this government. If you don't show empathy to an economic situation that's problematic, then you are saying that you don't care. The second part of it, though, which is interesting, is Mr. Carney really hasn't been that forthcoming coming out and talking to the press about stuff like this. He doesn't necessarily answer a lot of questions on the topic. If there are controlled. And they're kind of feeding into this notion that he's not available and he's not willing to communicate with you, Canadians. And those would be the two ways in which the opposition will utilize this information from Stats Canada. But if you listen to the bank economists across the country, a technical recession is what it is. They're looking to see what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure at this juncture, Tom, it's the R word that is the main inflection point politically. But if you have 0.1% growth or 0.1% contraction, either way, your economy has flatlined, which I do feel like becomes a political issue.
It's a huge political issue, and I love the way the word technical crab walked its way sideways and attached itself to the word recession. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm trying to find any textbook that gives a definition of a technical recession. Yes, officer. Technically, I was speeding, but it was only a few miles an hour above the speed limit. A recession is a recession is a recession.
It felt like when the promises were being made, Canadians were very receptive, Lisa, because it's refreshing to hear that level of ambition expressed. And it was in particular in this case. A year later, and not to say anyone expected it to materialize overnight, but a year later, it's very easy then for the opposition to say, hey, this is exactly what you said, and it's not coming anywhere close.
So true. And I think the other danger is that he gave Canadians hope in a kind of a hopeless kind of time for us dealing with the United States. I think the route that Pierre Poilievre has taken in talking about how he's hiding from you, meaning the Prime Minister is hiding from you, the Liberal Party has to be very careful about this, because if you recall, Tom, you and I were in the same election. Man, we went to town on Michael Ignatieff. He didn't come back for you. That stuck, and he could never, ever shake it. And if you allow this narrative to grow that the Prime Minister isn't here for you, he's not listening to you, he's doing other things, that's going to be hard to shake. So don't let this roll too far is what I would be advising the Liberal Party of Canada. Not that they take my advice, but nonetheless, it's definitely something that you do not want to take hold of, because Pierre Poilievre is very good at hammering a point over and over and over again.
What?
She's right.
Well, and now think about what Wayne Long was saying versus what Lisa Ray was saying, right? Well, he's traveling the world.
Right, he's not here.
I can't make my mortgage payments.
Right. And the Prime Minister is traveling the world, and in 1 year he spent more on food on his plane than most Canadians make in like what, a decade, 2 decades?
Something like that, yeah.
Crazy amount of money.
Over $500,000. It's gross. If I'm Prime Minister and I'm traveling on plane going to make trade deals in the middle of this type of situation, I'm saying, pack your sandwiches. We're having grilled cheese.
I was just going to say that, grilled cheese all the way.
And you know what? I don't get to eat well until Canadians get to eat well. That's what a real leader does. I'll tell you what a real leader doesn't do is this.
Prime Minister, can you?
Thank you again for coming.
Prime Minister, can you comment on the claims about a recession
I think the
and the economy, sir?
Credit to Laura Stone for that. Laura Stone of the Globe and Mail. And credit to her for releasing that video, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Mark Carney that a lot of Canadians who voted for the Conservatives knew was coming into power. And this is the behavior that Lisa Ray is saying, you better be darn careful, because recession's announced and the financial genius goes into hiding, doesn't want to answer to it. That's not a good look. Just saying. And no amount of explaining is going to wipe away what Canadians are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And this is what we said would happen, unfortunately. And I wish we were wrong, honestly.
Right, because, I mean, even when Carney was elected as Prime Minister, the Liberals won again, and we had said, I hope that they do something good for this country. And you can go back and look at the footage. And we said, we hope that they can fix things, but we're not holding our breath. And unfortunately, that seems to be what's happening.
Well, and we said enough time has to go by for things to unfortunately get worse, and for Canadians to actually realize this guy's not doing anything that he said he would. And my grocery bills are going higher. My gas is getting higher. Inflation is going higher. My rent, I'm not going to be able to pay.
We're running crazy deficits still. Look, they spent or allocated, I don't even know if it's been spent yet, but $200 million for a concrete pad out in the Maritimes. The $300 million prescribe IT scandal. This is just Justin Trudeau's government all over again, but wrapped up in a more expensive suit.